Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. What we're going to be focusing on today is going to be the pen tool and other tools that are very similar to it. A couple things on recommendations, what not to do, some of the inner workings, and that's going to be the main focus for today. Now, this particular tool is going to be a little bit more in-depth, so it wouldn't surprise me if this video does go a little bit long, so I'm just warning everyone right now. But with this tool, you will be able to have more customizations on the design and other elements that you want to work with. So let's begin. I'm going to start off with a letter preset. Nothing too complicated, at least in this one. And we still have the preset elements for what we had before. We had an essentials start off, brought the layers out here just for a little easier customability and such. And anything in the properties we need should be over in this area. Now, the majority of what we're going to focus on is going to be, once again, the actual pen tool itself. Now, interesting note, if you ever need to get there very quickly, you can just use P for pen, and that'll get you to this tool immediately. I'd recommend using that when you start feeling more comfortable with your shortcut keys. Let's give this a look. Now, I want to just show a little bit on how this tool works, and then I'm going to actually try and create something a little bit recognizable. So, the way that this works is, it's not like your traditional drawing software where you basically just click and drag around and then basically you make whatever you need. A pen tool works differently. If a person wanted to make a shape of some kind or line, you just give it a quick little tap and you will make little corners like this. Now, if you needed something a little bit rounder, that's also possible too. All we need to do is just click and drag instead like this. And you're going to make a little bit of a curve with two little handles, as you can see over here. And you can just click and drag for as much as you need to. Interesting note, if you hold down the Shift key, you'll be able to move completely side to side, diagonal, or up and down. Now in this case, I just need to go side to side to basically make this work. And then I can let go, and then just go to the other side, trying to line this up with this one over here. And then when you're ready to close this off, you can just click the very first dot that you clicked at the first point, and bam, you are done. And that's basically how you can make a shape like so, if this is the route that you want to go. Now, one thing I would probably recommend when doing this is don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think a lot of people would prefer to be able to make everything perfect the first time out. Most likely with the pen tool, that's not going to be working quite that way, at least at the beginning. But the good news about using the pen tool is if you need to make adjustments and changes later, that's 100% doable. Now what I'm going to do here is, and this will also help me with the other thing I wanted to show everyone with this, is I'm going to use the direct selection, and you can either select the path, or if this is already filled, which you can find out by going to the properties and the appearance, we can see that this is filled in with white, ironically. So it's a little hard to see what to select over here. But if you want to change the color, and I'm going to do that right now, since it kind of looks like a flower, I'm going to actually make this red, way easier to see. I'm just going to click and drag this out, as if it was supposed to be like a rose or something like that. Well, that's nice. And if you need to make adjustments or changes, similar to what we did to the last lesson when I was showing everyone how to manipulate shapes, you can use what's called the direct selection. And by the way, the shortcut keys for the following are V for victory for selection tool, and A for direct selection tool. Not really much of association with that one. It just happens to be A. So click that. And the nice thing about this is you can just click and drag any area that you want. And the nice thing about this, how this is starting out, is it does have some little areas that can help you out when trying to even things out. So I'm just bringing this out a little bit like so. Hey, that looks actually pretty nice. If I wanted to make myself a little bit of a rose. So I'm going to actually keep this to help with my lesson. So that's pretty much what you could do in this case. Now while we have this up, I'm going to show you a couple other things that's going to be helpful along the way as well. Some things that you're going to find that could be useful is if you wanted to make adjustments and changes to the actual shape that we have. Now, in terms of some of the things that you can do, we can do elements like add more points, because right now this is all the points that we have. And if we need to add any more, we can go to the pen tool again, just click and hold that down, and you'll see if there's any extra options in here. Now, since I've just recently updated the software, you might not see anything new over here, besides, of course, the pen tool and the anchor point tool. This can be a little bit vexing at first, but if you might be missing any kind of extra tools or extra options, there's a little area over here, which is called Edit Toolbar, which has all the different options that might be not available. So if you're ever noticing that some tools are not there, whether it's this tutorial or another one, try to hit these three little dots called the Edit Toolbar, and all you would need to do is just click and drag this to where the tool is supposed to be, and in this case we need to add in two of them. One is called Add Anchor Point Tool, the second one is called Delete Anchor Point Tool, and this basically does as it advertises. It adds points and subtracts them. Now, if necessary, you can go to the little plus or minus on your keyboard, and that'll basically do the same thing. But until you feel comfortable enough to do this, no shame in actually taking and dragging this particular tools over to the pen tool to use them however you need to. So I'm going to add an extra point in this area and this area, just so you can see how it's basically done. Okay, so this is all set. I'm going to click an extra point over here and an extra point over here. Oop. Now this might pop up if you don't actually hit the what's called stroke. Again, you can't just click anywhere to add a point. It's just not going to let you do that. So that was actually kind of nice that it came up. But if you select the actual path itself or stroke, bam, it comes up immediately. And if you need to make adjustments, you can just click the actual point itself, bring this out. And one thing to kind of keep in mind when you're working with anything that might be more curved instead of this little corner, the corners themselves will have no way to actually change it besides, of course, moving it around like this. Undo's your friend, that's Control Z, or Command Z if you're using a Mac. But if you do have something that's curved, again, it has these handles like so. So that is something to kind of keep in mind. And at least for now, we're just going to keep them this way, linked together, kind of going side to side like this. Now, if you want to, you could actually bring these a little bit closer like this. And it makes it a little bit more cornerish, but still a little roundish. Now, that's if you want it to be this way, of course. And of course, we can add more points, if necessary, to any corners, should we need them as well. But if you add it to any area that's mostly corners, you'll notice that this ends up being a corner itself. But then, for whatever reason, let's just say, I don't really need those extra points after all. Well, that's what the delete anchor point can do. You can just click these areas and bam, just gone, no fuss, no muss. The only thing you got to watch out for is there might be some kind of fall off of sorts for the changes that were made. So you might have to make some adjustments after the fact. It's not that big of a problem to fix, but it is something to kind of consider. So that's one thing to kind of look out for here. Okay, so this basically concludes what we could do with the pen tool. And again, you can get this over here. Actually, strike that. There is one last thing I want to show, and this is the anchor point tool. So technically, this is not the pen tool. It's actually another tool underneath the pen tool. But yeah, you click and drag, click this and hold this, go to the anchor point tool. And what this does, this is actually kind of neat. If a person wanted to make an area, say for example, this section a corner, you can just give this a quick little tap, and it turns these areas into corners very quickly. Now, this actually kind of helps because I can see that this area is a little bit lower than this one. I can bring this down a little bit easier now because I now have that information. So, again, Control or Command Z is your friend. There we go. Now, that looks a little bit nicer. There we are. And I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. Cool. So that looks a little bit nicer. And as I said before, most likely you're not going to get it 100% the first time out. And it's one nice thing about being able to have the direct selection tool and this anchor point tool over here. Now, say that, well, we got everything all checked out and ready to go. Well, if you want to make this area smooth again with the anchor tool selected, you just click and drag the anchor like so. And again, I'm holding shift when I'm doing this. And there it is, just making it nice and neat. And again, I'm doing the same thing for the other side. Doesn't look that nice though, so yeah, there we go. I'll just bring this up a little bit. Ooh. Move this down a little bit. There we are. So that's basically what the anchor point tool does. So to kind of recap, just click and drag this out while the anchor point tool is selected, and it makes it a curve. Just give it a quick little tap, and it turns it into a corner immediately. Once again, could be helpful stuff for you in the future. Now, the other thing that I want to show is the what's called the curvature tool. It looks like the pen tool. I'll actually put this back to what I had before so we can keep that up. But the curvature tool, what that'll do, is very similar to what we had previously. Basically what this will do, of course it helps if you actually have the right one. There we are. Now, unlike the pen tool, you don't really have the option to kind of click and drag to basically make this into a corner or a curve. It basically makes it into a curve automatically. Not necessarily a bad thing by any means, but depending on what you're trying to do with this will determine on if this could be useful or not. But like before, I'm just going to make the whole thing one more time. Where you start is going to be hopefully where you end if you want to close this. Now ideally you want to try not to go too crazy with the curves if possible, but there's just going to be some situations where you just have to go a little nuts with this. But more of that a little bit later. So once again, if I just click and drag this up like so, I could put this right beneath this as if it's supposed to be a stem for a rose. Of course, if I'm going to do that, I should really make this green by going to Fill. And I'm just going to choose one of the greens. Yeah, this will be fine. Now you'll notice that this is in front of my actual rose again. If you remember from a previous lesson, whatever's on the highest part of the layer will have priority, and whatever's on the topmost layer is going to be what was made last. So in this case, in my layer area, I'm just going to click and drag the stem of sorts down like so, and there we are. So that looks a little bit nicer. Again, if I don't like what I'm seeing though, I can use the curvature tool again, and of course it helps if you actually select what you wish to change. Yep, there we go. Curvature tool, and yeah, just basically change whatever's necessary. It should look a little bit nicer. Okay, there we go. And if you ever need to get rid of the points over here, this is of course important. As long as you're in the curvature tool and you select your point, you should be able to just hit the delete key and you should be fine. Not so much the case with the anchor points. And as you're seeing here, I'm just double checking with the stroke, making that a little bit bigger for a second. Yep, so no problems there. And that is my little rose to begin with. So that's pretty much the areas that I would find that would be the most useful for you. Now there's a couple other sections in here, I'm going to show at least two more, that are available, but I wouldn't recommend them right away. And of course I'll explain why. Now the one thing, before I go into that, one last thing I just want to make sure that I told everyone here is if you make a line, kind of like what I'm doing over here, or a stroke, like so, but you just want to have the stroke and not the color itself, well, there's a couple ways you could do that. Once you made the stroke the shape that you want it to be, if you hit the V key, or just select the little black arrow over here, this is your selection, it actually ends the creation of your stroke. And you can just leave it like this. Now, once I've done this and basically made my 1, 2, 3 points like so, all I would need to do is just go to the Fill, and from a previous lesson, if you choose the None option over here for the Fill section, bam. All I have is my stroke, making a couple elements a little easier to work with. And of course, if I need to see a little more of this, I can just go to the stroke area over here and just turn this up in terms of the points. And there is my extra line. And I could also do the same thing with another tool that I have here, going back to shapes. And there's one called Line Segment. Now what this does is it does what it's advertising. If I click and drag this, just a simple click and drag, it makes myself the simplest of lines. But once again, if you need to make a line go in a very specific direction, and you only need like maybe something like this can help out a ton. Now if you hold down Shift, you can go up, down, left, right, diagonal, perfectly doing this. Now in this case, I'm just going to have this go from left to right, so I'm not going to keep this too crazy. Like before, you can use the direct selection to take the anchor point and move it to the right. But here's something that's kind of neat. If I was to take either the pen or the curvature tool, I could actually go to the actual path itself, bring this down, bam. Relatively simple stuff to add extra points after the fact. So all the rules that I showed you with the pen tool can also affect this too. So that's a big help. And again, when you're ready to end a particular tool, just go to the selection tool or just hit V for victory. And there I am. So that's my shape. Just the last thing I wanted to show before I end this particular lecture is I wanted to show one called the paintbrush tool. Now, this is not one of my favorite tools, but I feel that you deserve to know what goes on with this. So let's take a look. What the paintbrush tool does is it basically makes a shape similar to that of an actual drawing software. Now, in some ways, this is kind of neat because, again, if you have a really steady hand and such, it does make shapes pretty nicely. So if you have a Wacom tablet or a Wacom Cintiq, that'll help out quite a bit. For those who are taking the Intro to Computer Graphics class, we'll be going to those at a later time. But here's what I don't like about these. So I'm just going to make myself this little doodle over here. Almost looks like a very strange gardening tool of sorts. If I was to go to direct selection, say I want to change something in here, you're going to add a lot of points that are going in for this. So you got to be really careful when you're working with this. Also, there's no guarantees that it's going to stop to where it's supposed to. So you're going to have to kind of stop this on your own when you're doing this. Now, I turned off the fill, but I can always turn that back on. I'll just change this to let's see, this color should be fine. Yeah, so again, it's not the end of the world if you use this, but you're going to have a lot of extra points here, and it's all going to be freehand. So if you're not quite too versatile with the mouse yet, I wouldn't recommend using this at all unless absolutely necessary. That being said, the pen tool is a great tool for most of your needs. I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to be one of the bread and butter tools you're going to be using with Illustrator. But that being said, even though the pen tool is great, the curvature tool is good if you just need to make some shape very quickly and you don't need any corners. At the very least, you can use this as a starting point and make adjustments after the fact. So you can do everything within one tool. Very helpful for us. Now the other tool that I showed you was the line segment tool. Again, this could basically just click and drag her over. And I showed the paintbrush tool, which is basically this area over here. So this is how you can make all your own custom shapes using Illustrator, and you've basically seen an example of what you can do with this right now. So hopefully you'll find this is going to be useful for future projects. I do want to do a little bit more demonstrations on what you can do in terms of more of a practical purpose. But for now, I would recommend taking the tools I've shown you, practice with them a little bit, and next time we're going to use this for something a little bit more practical. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you the next time.